Hi, everyone. Welcome to the eighth Amos product call. I can't believe we've been together already for 8 product calls. Um, and let's make this one as successful as all the previous ones. So I haven't had as much time as I wanted to think about this stuff, but I think I've had enough time. So that's actually what matters, doesn't it? Um, and so let's go through it. These are the stuff that we discussed yesterday, and let's see what the sort of conclusions, at least on my end, are. So first, let's get rid of the stuff that is not relevant right now, and I think we can start with the most easiest one. This one, I think that my conclusion on this one is yes, it's not a bad idea, but I can find a way to make it easily implementable, like to make it yeah, even just on the specification level. And so I think that we shelve it for now. Yeah. So it is still the case that you gain more reputation if you are the one of the first people to come in to a resource, and so the incentives are still kind of there to contribute mainly to new resources. The thing that I spent the most time thinking about, and the hardest question of all, is how to do topics and learning dependencies. And since I didn't come to a conclusion yet, I believe it's a good idea to come to a conclusion on this call. So let me back up a little. So I got the idea for Amos about 2 years ago when I decided I'm gonna learn to code, partly for the job opportunities that coding gives you, financial / lifestyle, and partly also to create this audio project, which I had a long time ago, the idea of. And so while I was learning to code, I realized that it's really hard to find resources. And I would always have to go to Udemy and Coursera and YouTube and Google, use 4 search engines just to find out what to freaking learn. And so this idea really prevailed, and I think that the internet needs a vertical search engine. A vertical search engine is just a domain-specific search engine for learning resources that can make the internet into the ultimate learning tool that it can really be. And so obviously I've been thinking about that idea ever since then. For example, so I noticed I was lucky that I worked in some very technical fields, such as mathematical optimization. That was only for a while, but then I moved on to formula verification, and that was very interesting. And I realized that in order to do formula verification, which essentially, just to summarize what it's about, so it's about writing formal specs for a program, usually a simple program, of course, not a front-end application, and running them through a proof engine in order to mathematically prove with 100% certainty, abstracting away the implementation of the spec in the proof engine, that your program does what it does what it's supposed to do. And so as soon as I sort of got onto that project, I realized, okay, so I don't know formula verification. Okay, I need to learn that. But then I realized, oh shit, in order to learn formula verification, I need to understand like lambda calculus for this in order to even do this particular tutorial. So I had to learn lambda calculus. And then I also ended up learning computational theory just because I felt like it. So I spent like 2 or 3 weeks just learning stuff, which is pretty cool. Getting that opportunity when you're in a job. Anyways, and then it proceeded on to other things. I also ended up doing some stuff with cryptography, actually just learning, not working. And I had a presentation at a co-working space, and I talked about cryptography. It's on YouTube as well under my personal channel. And one of my friends attended, and he's like, after the presentation, I'm like, okay, so what did you think? And he's like, I did not understand anything. And I'm like, what? Why? And he's like, well, because the second slide had modular arithmetic, and I've never done modular arithmetic. So then I realized that, you know, this concept of learning requirements, learning dependencies is very important. For formalification, at least the tutorial that I was going through, you needed lambda calculus. For cryptography, at least the presentation that I was giving, and in fact, all of cryptography, you need modular arithmetic. And then it continued onwards, and yeah, I mean, I could give more examples, I guess. Yeah, I was reading this book called The Innovators, which is about the history of the computer, and I realized that I don't know like electrical engineering, so I spent a few days or weeks, more like days, learning that stuff. The bottom line is my experience with this has mainly been through technical subjects. And the thesis that I want to make is that for technical subjects, it makes sense to separate topics and learning dependencies. But the thesis I also want to make is, conversely, for humanities subjects, it doesn't make so much sense. It's very, very infrequent that in humanities, this could be, effectively separated. So a few months ago, I actually read this book called For Good and Evil. It's about the impact of taxes on civilizations. I'm also very interested in history, or at least used to be. And so for that book, definitely, like in order to read that book, you have to know history. Well, because it's about the impact of taxes on history, but it's not a history 101 course. So in some humanitarian stuff, you can divide topics and learn dependencies. But if I really look at most of the stuff that I read or that I've read in the past few years, it's not so straightforward. A lot of the times, the topics and learn dependencies are pretty much the same for non-technical subjects. What do you guys think? So there's essentially two ways of doing it. Separating it as we currently have it, or combining it to one where we would have something like just a list of topics, and that would be essentially the topic, as well as maybe the difficulty, which is essentially the learning dependency part, right? It's how much you have to know of this topic in order to fully grasp the learning resource. And then finally, we would have the weight, which is like how important it is. So essentially, these triplets can encode. It could encode both topics, which would have a difficulty of 0, and then the weight would, in that case, be like how much of an important topic it is, like. And it could also encode learning dependencies, where the difficulty would be, how much you need to know in order to understand that. What do you guys think? So think back to some of the stuff you've been, all of us are learning all the time, whether it's on Medium or whether it's actual, slightly longer learning resources like books or Udacity or courses or whatnot. Most of us do both, a little bit of technical and a little bit of non-technical, whether it's, I don't know, news about tech world, whether it's stuff about blockchain, that might be more technical, whether it's, whether it's some completely unrelated field that we're very interested in, like whatever, politics, history, I don't know, psychology, philosophy, spirituality, history, economics. uh,
So
think
for a
back
new
to those. Yeah, Ani.
for a new topic, how will you decide the difficulty
For the
or
what?
weight for a new topic? Let's say, I mean, what can be difficult for you might not be difficult for somebody else, and vice versa.
That's very true. So great point there, Ani. So rather than difficulty, it should have, like, when I say difficulty, it's more like an objective sense of difficulty. So maybe we could find a better word for it. But I don't mean like your subjective difficulty. It's more like like maybe a level of 1 to 5, which is, or 1 to 3, which is how good you have to be in that topic. Either novice, an apprentice, journeyman, master, expert.
All right. So one thing that I was thinking, and this is just a very preliminary thought, is that when you add a particularly new, let's say, topic, it can start with a difficulty and wait for one, and as more and more people start uh, adding more resources to it, so based on that we can have some calculations which will keep on increasing the difficulty of it.
Got it,
If
got it.
if more and more dependencies fall on this particular topic, then probably this is more. But then it doesn't contribute to the fact that it can be more difficult. Just that it is more important topic. I'm not sure how.
Definitely, definitely. So I definitely agree with that, and that's actually another thing that I was going to mention, which is I think that we sort of underestimated like the collective information that we'll get. So I agree that if we had just one review for every resource, we need to make it very, very granular and semantic and detailed. But let's say we have, we're expecting we're going to have a lot of reviews for every resource. So that's where we can actually encode stuff that we don't need to in each of the reviews forms themselves. So what am I trying to say? So I think a perfect example right now is topic. So the way the backend model is set up right now is topics don't have a weight. It's just a list. And then you might ask, okay, but that's really, really weird. Maybe this book is like the primary topic is management, but maybe it also talks about sort of the hard disk industry. So I'm referring to a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, a really good book, by the way. One of the chapters is about the hard disk industry because it's a case study, but the ultimate topic of the book is essentially management in the face of innovation. And the answer to that would be, since we'll have a lot of people submitting reviews, it's very likely that some of them will say that it talks about the hard disk industry because they're going to be very granular, but some of them are only going to say that it talks about management. So if you think about it like the law of large numbers, or whatever it's called in statistics, the most important topics are going to be the ones with the highest count. That's actually very interesting. And I was thinking about how to use that fact for the learning dependencies as well. And on that note, I'd actually like to suggest that we make our learning dependencies easier, even if we go with the way we've gone until now. But even before that, what do you guys think about this?
I think I sort of missed out on a couple of points over there. Maybe others can. Jost, Mukul, Mohammed.
Yeah, I mean this stuff is it's very interesting in that it's so surprising how hard it is, right? I mean, we've all spent years learning, and yet somehow it seems to be so hard to sort of systematize this into an actual system. And the reason is because when you're learning, you're not thinking about it, right? So you really need to be like, make a conscious decision to think about this stuff in order to gain any understanding from it. It's a peculiar thing.
Yeah. I think we need a little more thought on how to exactly have difficulty. I'll also check up on with the various algorithms people usually use.
So just to summarize, the current solution is we have topics that are they're just essentially a list of topics that you can submit. And we also have learning dependencies, and those are triplets of like the strength sort of, or weight, the topic, and like the level, right? And again, it's kind of a list. You can submit many. And so the alternative way of doing it is combining it into one, where we always have the topic, then we have sort of the difficulty, which is what does the resource assume that how good you are in that topic. So the difficulty maps to level, doesn't it? And now, how about strength? Does that map to weight? So strength is like either it's necessary or it's like weekly recommended.
It's recommended. So it should
I
be
just feel
recommended.
like, okay, so the idea, I think my understanding is that this thing is pretty much the same thing as this thing. And the reason is, if you have a difficulty of 0, then there's no point of having any weight. And the reason is precisely what we said before. We don't need to assign weights to topics, because depending on the most popular ones that people submit, the law of the law of sort of uniform distribution will take care of that. And alternatively, when you do have a difficulty that's larger than 0, i.e. it's also a learning dependency, not just the topic, but a learning dependency, then the weight would essentially show you how strong that particular resource is, or how strong that particular learning dependency is. And so I think that they're the same thing. And in fact, I think this one is less semantic, because this one also allows you to separate learning dependencies and topics, while this one does not. And I still think that, despite of what I said, that for example in humanities you usually have topics be learning dependencies as well, or like they're kind of the same thing. I think that some of the examples that I gave earlier, like the impact of taxes on history, or formalification, or cryptography, or electrical engineering and the history of the computer, there it's quite clearly cut. You don't need to, I mean, a history of the computer is not going to talk about electrical engineering, because it's a history, it's a story about people and teams and ideas and revenge and inspiration and all of that human stuff. But there's going to be a learning dependency. What do you guys think? Did I say that pretty well? Is the conclusion of what I said that we go with the current model, or do you find that a non sequitur?
Dom, can you please come again with the difficulty? Like, what is the difficulty? What does it define, difficulty?
Difficulty would be like how it would be essentially the same thing as strength. So, the same thing as level. So how good do I have to be in that topic before I consume this resource? So I'll give you an example. If you read anything about, for example, I don't know, proof of stake in blockchain, then it's very likely that you have to know about what blockchain is. So there will be a topic of like proof of stake, but then there would also be a learning dependency of maybe consensus algorithms or blockchain.
So according to the level, as I think it is some kind of like recommended or like strongly recommended or something.
That's the way. That's like how strongly it is recommended, but the difficulty or the level is like okay, so now I'm strongly recommending it to you, but like what am I recommending it to you? Like at what level am I recommending that you be in this topic, right? So I can say it's, for example, strongly recommended that you understand a little bit of something, or it's weakly recommended that you are an expert in it. And those two things are pretty much the same thing, but we sort of encode them as different things.
So as I think like we can have the alternative approach as well about the like topic difficulty and weight.
No, I don't think that's that easy for something like learning dependencies. I think it's easiest for format, then maybe position, then maybe price, and then there's like a big cutoff, and then topics are already pretty hard, and there's another big cutoff, and learning dependencies are the hardest.
All right. So what do you think, Ani?
So my conclusion from this is, let's iterate. Let's stick with what we have, because I think it's good we thought about it, but for the last few hours, neither myself on a group call, nor anyone else has been able to come up, at least in my view, with something better than what we already have. So I think that's pretty good indicator that what we have is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I think either way it makes sense. Just I think it's a bit difficult to grasp difficulty and weight than what we have on the top on the as the current structure.
I agree. Okay, we're going with this for the MVP. Cool.
Yeah, I think if we need to iterate later on, we can easily iterate to the next one or something else, a version of that. I think we are good for now.
I agree. Cool. And the last thing that I sort of wanted to talk about here, let me take a 1 minute break. I'll pause the recording. Okay, we're back. So the last thing we want to talk about is chronologically the first thing on our list, and that is getting possibly rid of some metadata fields in preference of automation. So we briefly talked about this, or more like just outlined it yesterday. And the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me. Let me try to highlight the advantages and the disadvantages. The only disadvantage I see is that maybe the users will feel like our form is not long enough. Like they will look at our form and they will be like, okay, it's only URL topics and learn dependencies. I don't think that I'm contributing a lot of value. I'm not going to do it. Bye-bye. I think I think we can get past that by telling the users in the Amos chat boxes that in fact, we're actually asking their help only for the stuff that requires human intelligence, and that everything else we can automate on our end. So what requires human intelligence? Well, picking the learning resources from the billions of URLs that are available on the World Wide Web, picking those tens or thousands or millions that represent the learning resources that are the best for people, and as well as the topics and learning dependencies. So the stuff that requires human intelligence, and we can automate everything else. So if we make that clear, I think that disadvantage goes away. What are the advantages? Number one, it makes the back end simpler. Why am I saying that? So both from a data structure perspective. Why? Because I think that we should, for the MVP, get rid of this stuff in the data models as well. So yeah, we just build an MVP, and then later on we worry about building the automation scripts to fill out the format, the price, the position, etc. Our right now, always the goal is to release as fast as possible and to start getting data points. And I also think it's easier on the game theoretical side because something like the position or the price are a little bit harder to sort of grasp, both from the user on the UX and also like from an algorithmic perspective. So I really think this is better. And also, of course, it makes the whole system easier, less screens to code, less lines of code to write. So tell me what you guys think. Due to the above comments, am really in favor of getting rid of stuff that I believe in the future can be automatized for 95% of resources. For those that it can't, either we do it manually or we actually in MVP 2.0 build out the front end screens for people to help us. But I think we shouldn't assume we need help when for 95% of things, we won't. I think that sounds good. Ani, I think I pitched this yesterday, and you were a little bit skeptical of it. I think that's because I didn't explain it very well yesterday. I thought about it, and I think I explained it much like more powerfully today. So I'm more in favor of this. Love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with this. We need to redesign that flowchart we did last time, and then we can get started with the models.
Indeed. On that note, what will I be doing the next few days, or tomorrow morning or today evening? I will finish up the wireframes here. Why don't I start adding that into my backlog? Okay, there's a lot of stuff here, but okay, whatever. Oops. So I will finish the wireframes. That will be very, very easy. I will also have a look at whether we should do mono repo or multi-repo, as well as what's the best way to share components. I think that's a pretty interesting question, and I am a little bit siding towards mono repo for some reasons. I posted two very interesting links in general dev. I will check them out, read and think about it, and let's discuss tomorrow or on Slack. And also I will be following up fundraising today and tomorrow. So now that we have the backend pretty much finalized, let's have a backend call tomorrow. I'm free anytime. And also let's have a front-end call ideally tomorrow with the wireframes done, where we can, and also until then we need to discuss the mono repo stuff, and we can begin building. I'm glad we spent quite a lot of time on spec. I mean, I think, Ani, do you know when you joined the project, you were actually the first one?
Yeah.
I think, was it like beginning of April, or was it mid-April or end of April?
I don't remember. I think it was somewhere in April, I guess.
Yeah, I also think so. So I think we spent at least a month working on the specification, which I think was time really well invested. I have quite a lot of confidence that our model is the best mapping we can do between sort of human understanding of learning resources, whether conscious or unconscious, and its formal implementation. As I discussed in one of the previous calls, it's impossible to have a 100% mapping. That would sort of require artificial intelligence. But our goal is to find the best trade-off, the best balance between what's simple and what's semantic, what delivers or conveys meaning from the real world. And I think we did a pretty good job at that. Nevertheless, all of this stuff are hypotheses. Let's begin validating those hypotheses, and most importantly, helping make education better and more accessible. I will leave the floor open to comments and questions, advice and suggestions, and then I will leave the call.
I would suggest let's have like a deadline sort of thing for our MVP to actually go out.
I think I've always been thinking of 6 weeks since we begin coding, and I think since we've greatly simplified that, I think that is much more doable now. What do you think?
I agree.
I think 6. I mean, come on, the whole front end is like 5 screens now. I could probably code it in 2 weeks. So I think that's a pretty good goal.
Yeah. Let's take 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad that you think it's even less.
Yeah.
Oh, and maybe a small thing. I just realized that I mentioned it, but didn't go into depth. I mentioned that, even if we do go with the current state, I think that we can simplify it. So let me elaborate. Currently, we have strength 1 to 5, and we have level B in terms of hours. And let's just make it easier for everyone, because at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones that are going to be the first 10 users of the application submitting metadata. So since we're going to be using this, we might as well make it easy for ourselves. So let's make strength 1 to 3, and let's make level also 1 to 3. And the idea is we're using the same concept from topics, that we're making it less semantic from an individual perspective. But since we'll have a lot of data, then the semanticism will arise out of quantity. So I think that sounds much better, because it's easier to pick an option from 3 than it is to pick an option from 5. And essentially, if you really think about it, like if you're learning stuff, it's people tend to be lazy. Like people don't even take notes when they're learning stuff. I try to take notes most of the time, physical notes. And so when you're learning stuff, it's already an effort. Taking notes is another effort, and then categorizing what you're learning is a third effort. So in other words, we need to make it really, really simple. Like people should just literally click a Chrome extension, and they should be done with the whole form in 10 seconds, or on their mobile app. And I think there's law that the less options you give people, the faster they select one. So if we make it 1 out of 3, then they won't have to think about the individual details. And also another huge advantage, it's of course easier, again, fewer lines of code, but also it gives people more reputation, because there's a larger chance that somebody will pick the same strength out of 3 than out of 5.
Is there a chance that a strength might be more than 3 or something like that?
No. I think so. So strength 3 would be like it's necessary. Strength 2 would be it's recommended. And then I still haven't found a way to how to name strength 1, like weekly recommended, or it would be cool if you know this, or it would be good if you know this, suggested, advocated, advised. I haven't I haven't found a good natural language translation for strength one. And then I think it makes a lot of sense, yeah, to make level discrete rather than a number of hours. Rather, let's just make it 1 to 3. So beginner, intermediate, advanced. So an example of a learning dependency would be, I think that you have to be at least a beginner in this topic in order to enjoy the resource. Or I think that it's necessary that you are at least an expert in this topic in order to enjoy this resource. Let's say you're reading an academic paper on mathematics, then you have to, it's necessary that you're an expert in order to understand the first line of text.
Cool.
Great. Thanks a lot, guys. Let's make this happen.